Huh? We're live?
Yep.
We're live. Was there any in the rating room?
Yeah, it was like 30 people.
Very good. All right.
I'm going to give you my phone so you can see the chat.
G'day, everyone. G'day, everyone. Get your YouTube working. It is working. YouTube is definitely working. It is working, yeah?
Seems to be.
Cool. All right. Let's rock and roll. Today, we are talking all things strategy. And we're going to be talking about the Flamingo investment. Is that loud? Sorry. The air conditioner isn't working in the office, so we have the window open because it's hot as balls. And, yeah, sorry if you hear something. So we're talking about the Flamingo investment strategy today, which is essentially the property investment strategy that I follow, that we roll out for our clients. And it's made up of 5 components. So we have accumulation. We have acceleration. We have incubation. We have consolidation. And we have evolution. So we have 5 components to our strategy, and you have to go through all 5 to actually build a strong portfolio. So accumulation is essentially where we are accumulating assets. We are growing our asset base, or our gross asset base. Acceleration is essentially going to the assets that we've bought and making them worth more money and making the rental yields on those assets greater to increase the cash flow. Essentially making those assets into the highest and best use. We then go through incubation, which is where you make all the money. It's just holding the assets for a long period of time. Then we go through a sell down period, which we call consolidation, which is probably one of the most misunderstood parts of the strategy. And then we roll our capital into evolution assets, which are commercial in the real estate sector. So let's start with accumulation. Fuck yeah, get a little bit of that juice in there. Accumulation. Now, essentially, the way accumulation works, let's talk about if someone's starting from zero or about zero. You are a person that has $200,000 of cash, okay? Excluding, anything else, this is essentially your net worth, okay? You have $200,000. Now, if we try to generate cash flow of $200,000 and we said we were going to get a 5% yield, do you want to close that window? Yeah. I'm just going to have to put up with the heat and the sweat. Yeah, we'll be fine. So if we try to generate $200,000 of cash flow, of $200,000, and let's say we had a 5% yield on that $200,000, we would get a grand total of $10,000 a year in cash flow, which is well and truly less than what people want to live on. Okay? So for us to be able to generate more cash flow, and let's say that we wanted to, 20x that number and get to $200,000 a year in cash flow, what do you think we need to do to this number? We probably need to 20x it as well. So we need to get our $200,000 to $4 million. Okay, because then $4 million at 5% generates a $200,000 a year of income. So accumulation is all about using this $200,000 to go and accumulate more assets, right? To begin with, that $200,000 is going to go into our first property. Let's say that property is a $1 million asset. We've now got a $1 million property growing in value, and let's say that property grows at 7% per annum. It's making us $70,000 per annum. It'll make $70,000 the first year, a little bit more the second year, a little bit more the third year. And over time, the property value grows, and because the $200,000 we've put in is also growing, obviously our capital base grows. Do you want to close that too, so we've got noise? It's going to be hot, folks. It's going to get really hot and spicy in here, so we're sorry. So this is what stage one is all about. So people, what they try and do when they start investing in property is they try and generate cash flow from day one. They want to make sure that, the property's putting money in their pockets every single week, month, and year. But the reality is they have no capital to be able to generate money with. So before you can generate cash flow, you need to grow your capital base. And if I use this example right here, $200,000 of cash flow, if it's generating as a 5% return, assuming we have no debt, it's generating is $10,000 a year. Not much good. If we want $200,000 a year, then we've got to reverse engineer how much capital we need, which is about $4 million. So we need $4 million of net equity to generate us $200,000 a year of income. If you want $2 million a year of income, you got to 10x those numbers. Okay? So stage one, accumulate. Roll your first bit of money into your first piece of real estate. Roll your first piece of real estate into your second piece of real estate, and so on and so forth. Now, this money only grows if we give it time in the market to grow. Okay? This is what I started with. I started with a small amount of cash, and over time it's grown into a very, very large amount of capital. So always start here. If you have no capital, you need to grow your capital. Very, very simple. Okay? Now, the second step to the strategy is acceleration. Acceleration. Good? Quick spelling right there. Now, what I mean by acceleration is, let's use our example that we put in. Property value is, let's say, $1 million. Inside of that property, we've got 200,000 of cash flow. Okay, this is the property. Over time, that $1 million property is going to go to being worth $1.5 million. And guess what? The debt is still going to remain the same. So you put in your 200,000 originally, you've got $800,000 of debt. So your debt on this is still 800. And there's two things that have happened. One, the original 200,000 that you've put into it has now turned into 700,000. And you're probably going, Jack, how does that happen? Well, the difference between 800 and 1.5 is 700,000. So if we've got 700,000 now of equity, and you only put in originally 200, we're probably going to need to open that door because it is hot. You've essentially 300 or 300%, 3x'd your initial investment, more than 3x, 3.5x your initial investment. So you've grown your capital base. Obviously, this is the accumulation phase. But the chance is that this property that's now worth $1.5 million might be tired. You might be able to subdivide it. You might be able to increase the cash flow. So the acceleration piece of the strategy is then using some of this $700,000 of equity that you've created to put back into the property to make it worth more money and to increase the cash flow. So if we can put in, a part of that $700,000 and we turn one property into a house and a granny flat and we make it worth more money, it might be now worth $2 million, for example, and we only spent $300,000 of this $700,000 to do it, which means we've then made another $200,000, and we might have increased the cash flow from, being $900 per week now to being $1,600 per week, for example. So we've used some of the money that the property has made us to then make the properties more valuable, to increase the cash flow of the properties, and to make them better assets. Okay, so that's the acceleration piece. I've showed you an example on one property, but guess what? If you've got 10 properties, you can do it to 10 properties. So it's all about accumulating your assets, then accelerating them. Now, one of the questions people ask, God bless me, one of the questions people ask is, can you do it at the same time? The answer to that question is absolutely yes, you can. You can accumulate and accelerate at the same time, and a lot of our clients do this. They will buy properties and they'll add value to those properties straight away. They'll buy another one, they'll add value to it, and the money that they've created then gets used to buy their next little piece on the Monopoly board. Okay? So you can accelerate and accumulate at the same time. You can go through and accumulate aggressively, then go back and accelerate. There's no right or wrong. It's just on what works for you as an individual. But if you've got all these assets sitting in your portfolio that, are tired, that you could increase the cash flow on, that are just sitting there not being maximized, then you're leaving money on the table. Okay? Yes. So don't... Incubation. Sometimes gets... I'm not even going to say it. Don't worry, Jack. You know what I was going to say, Joel? sometimes gets confused with.
Yeah, anyway.
It starts with M, you know?
That's it.
Incubation. Okay, this is just a fancy word, for holding, do nothing. You think about like an egg that gets incubated, it sits there, and over time, a beautiful chicken or something comes out of it. Okay, so what we try and do is if I give you a timeline here, this is 0, this is 30 years. Okay, in the middle here, 15 years. So let's say we've got a 30-year timeline. Let's use me as the example. Right here, I'm 29, and up here, I will be 59. Fuck, that's crazy to think about, hey, 30 years. So this is Jack Henderson. Okay, let's assume I'm starting at 0, and I've got 30 years to grow my wealth. If we said that for the first 7 years of my investment journey, I'm going to grow my wealth my gross asset base from 0, and I want to get it to 10 mil. Okay, chances are, and this is going to answer the question around like, how much debt have you got on your portfolio? That fucking question comes up all the time, all right? Debt on a portfolio matters when you're 60. Debt on a portfolio doesn't matter when you're in your 30s because you're growing, so you need to use debt to grow. So for all those people, how much debt you got, that's what they look like to me, all right? That doesn't matter. So the thing that we want to do is always use the equity to go and buy the next property, the next property, the next property, okay? And you're going to get to this position where you might have 10 mil of value and $8 million of debt, okay? So let's say that we've got $8 million in debt. We're 80% leveraged, okay? That's in year 7. This is what we would call acceleration. I fucked it up. This is what accumulation and acceleration. Okay, so accumulation and acceleration has happened over the first 7 years of our journey. Now, let's say that we're going to hold from year 7 to year 27, which is here. Okay, so we're going to hold for this period of time. So what happens is we've got 10 years. The assets might go from being worth 10 to being worth 20 million over that period of time. Okay, we don't acquire any more, but we just hold the assets that we've got. So we've made 10 million bucks over that period of time, and all we've done is hold. And let's also assume we have never paid down $1 of the 8 million in debt. So we've still got 8 million in debt. Guess what? Does it actually matter now that we have $8 million in debt? Well, no, because the portfolio has gone from being worth 10 million to 20 million, and the debt remains the same. But what has changed is the loan to value ratio. So essentially how relevant that debt is to the value of the portfolio. Now, of course, if you also paid down that debt over that 10-year period while the portfolio grew, you would have more equity. Chances are, though, you could use that cash for being more productive. In my instance, it would be to grow my business. So now you've got $12 million. So your net number up the top here is 12 million bucks, which means if we were to sell the portfolio down at year 27, remember we started at, that's year 17. I'm saying we did year 7. Yeah, sorry, that's wrong. Let's say it's 27 anyway. So let's say we started here. We started with our 200,000. We grew that from 200,000 into a 10 million portfolio with 8 million in debt. We then did nothing. We've now got $12 million worth of capital. This is where we could roll into our consolidation. Okay? Now, what would happen at this period of time, which I'm going to run through next in consolidation, is we would sell these properties down. Okay, and we would have to pay a little bit of capital gains tax. We'd have to pay some selling agents. We'd have to pay a lot of stuff. And out of that 12 million, we might end up with $9 million of net equity. Okay, now if I did this and I was 29 now and I'd held it for 20 years, whatever it is, I'd be in my 40s, early 50s. And, I may or may not want to work, but I've got 9 million bucks to play with. Obviously, if I keep holding longer and the debt remained the same, so we'd still get to here, the debt would still be 8 million, but the property value might be now 35 million. And $8 million worth of debt. Again, you wouldn't be worried, right? Even though 8 million is still the same 8 million back here, the value of the assets is dramatically different, so the 8 million is less relevant. Okay? But the consolidation phase is all about turning these two numbers, gross value and debt, it's essentially converting these into this number here, which is the net equity number. And like I said, this is where you make all the money. Because here you only had $2 million worth of money. Over this next 10 years, you've turned your $2 million, which is the equity, the debt between the gap, between the debt and the value, into $12 million, which means you've 6x'd your equity position, or you've had a 600% growth, okay? Even though the portfolio has only doubled. Okay, so this is consolidation. Grow to a certain point, then stop growing and just hold and let the market do its thing. Sure, if you've still got lots of surplus, you could probably still grow again, but we try to break it down into really clear, distinct periods. So incubation is essentially just holding. You know, you might switch your loans, for example, during the incubation from interest only, which I talk about all the time, to principal and interest, for example. That'll do two things. That'll bring your interest rate down, and you will also start paying some debt down if you had the surplus cash to do so. So these are the things we look at during the the incubation phase, which is when we are essentially allowing our portfolio to grow and let our debt position become less relevant. What do you want from me? All right, we got some questions here. I just noticed you were live and was curious if you were looking for alternative thumbnail designs. Fuck yeah, bro. How good's that pitching while I'm live? You're a good man. You're funny watching from Monaco. All very sound advice also. Thank you. Hey, Joel, where do you ask questions or type it in the chat now? Joel's a good man, isn't he? Joel's becoming a little bit famous now. The SMSF question. The SMSF question was... Hey, mate, can you do this strategy with your SMSF? Yeah, I'll answer that question at the end. I'll actually show you a strategy that, you know, I employ. Where are we right now? We're in Consolidation. Okay, now, let me run you through why this is important. So I'm going to use the same example before. 12 million in assets. No, sorry, it was 20 million in assets. 20 million in assets. It was 8 million in debt and 12 million of gross equity. Now, the reason I say gross equity is because obviously when you sell, you're going to pay tax, you're going to pay selling fees and stuff like that. So we got 20 million in assets, we got 8 million in debt, and we got 12 million in gross equity. Now, what happens when you buy residential properties is that your capital growth well and truly outweighs your rental growth. Okay? So let's assume that on our $10 million of assets, because that's what we had originally, we had $8 million with debt, $10 million with assets. Let's assume that that was generating a 5% return. So we're getting $500K a year in income with $8 million worth of debt. We're paying 6% on that. We're about net neutral. Okay? Now, what happens is, over time, our value of assets goes from 10 to 20 million. But our rental income, let's just say it grows at 3% per annum, keeps up with inflation, our rent, let's just assume that, over 10 years would grow by 30%. So our 500 would go to being 650K, but now that 650K is tied to 20 million of assets. And if you look at the rental yield, 650,000 against 20 million of assets, I would say it's about a 3.5% gross yield. So what's happened over that period of time is we've now got 3.5% gross yield against our 20 million in assets when we started with a 5% gross yield against 10 million of assets. And that's because in residential real estate, generally speaking, the capital growth in good areas well and truly outweighs the rental growth. So if we just kept those assets and had the 650 worth of rental income, remember, we've still got the $8 million worth of debt. And if we're paying 6% interest only on $8 million worth of debt, we got $480,000 worth of interest repayments. So let me break this down for you. We've got 650K of rent. We've got 480K of interest. And let's assume that we have 1% of the property portfolio's value in expenses like land tax, property management fees, all that jazz. 1%, another 200 grand on top. So what you now notice is you've got, what have we got? 480 and 200 is 680K of expenses. And we've only got 650 of income. So we're actually 30K negative. Okay, you're $30,000 a year negative when you've got $12 million worth of gross equity. And that's because we're still carrying a big chunk of debt and the residential assets have a lot of expenses that you as the owner or the landlord pay for. So if we wanted to retire, we can say we've got this big portfolio and we've got all this equity, but it's still not cash flowing. And this is why the consolidation phase is so important. And I speak to people all the time about this. Oh, Jack, how am I ever going to retire? My portfolio doesn't give me any income. But the reason is because they're looking at their portfolio as the same portfolio that's going to get them from growth to cash flow. Exactly the same portfolio, they don't have to make any changes, which is not the case in any other investment class. If you go speak to a financial planner about your superannuation, you go speak to an investment banker about whatever it is, they're going to tell you that there is a time in your life for growth and there is a time in your life for cash flow. Okay, and in super, you look at it, most financial planners have your super when it's in accumulation, it's wanting to grow, growing. And then when you roll over into pension phase, they switch your portfolio completely and they're all about income now, income and capital preservation. Property is no different. So what we would do in this case is, like I said, we're $30,000 negative. We're going to sell down the portfolio. Like I said, we got $12 million of equity. So out of that $12 million of equity on $20 million worth of property, let's say we've got selling costs of 2.5%. So that would equal 500 grand. Okay, so 12 mil. Now this is our expense line item before it. We got 500 grand of selling costs. That would then take us down to 11.5 million. Let's say that we've got some depreciation we might have to pay back, whatever. I'm just going to do round numbers, guys. Out of the 12 million, we might then pay CGT on $10.5 million. And let's say we pay CGT at 23.5% on $10.5 million, which means we would pay about $2.5 million of CGT. Which means if you add 2.5 and 500, we're in for 3. We had 12 million. Guess what? We end up with $9 million of equity at the end after we've sold, paid the selling agents, and paid our CGT bill. Okay, I'm assuming our CGT bill, as we've been given a 50% discount because we've owned all the assets for longer than 12 months, and they've been owned in a structure that gives us a discount. So now we've got $9 million of equity, $9 million of cold hard cash sitting in the bank. This is what happens during the consolidation phase. All the time and effort you've put into growing your portfolio over the past 10, 20, 30 years comes down to this amount of money. And remember, the initial amount of money that we started with was 200K. So we've turned 200K into 9 million. I don't want to work out that. You can work it out in your calculator, but it's a lot, okay, as a percentage. Now, how much, if we use our rule of thumb of 5%, do you reckon $9 million worth of equity could generate, even if we took on no debt? Well, let me do some quick maths to you. If we did a 5% return on 9 million, we'd end up with $450,000 of income. But guess what? The exact same portfolio, when we had the debt, was actually costing us $30,000 a year. And that's why consolidation is so important and evolution is so important, is because we want to move it out of growth-focused assets and we want to move it into cash flow, okay? And this is when you consolidate and you go through evolution. I honestly reckon I could go on a competition for Australia's messiest handwriting. Do you notice sometimes I write the second letter of a word before I write the first letter? Do you notice that? I write a letter, I'll write Jack, and before I write J, I'll write A, and then I'll come back and write the J. It doesn't make any sense. So this is the evolution, right? So we've sold down. We've got our $9 million worth of equity. And this is all about pushing it into cash flow, right? Now we've got options. We've got cash in the bank. We're assuming we've got no other debt. And this is when we start to generate income. Now, if I was young, I'd probably take on some debt. I'd probably go take on $9 million worth of debt with my $9 million worth of equity. Really quick maths. I'd go buy something for 18 mil or multiple assets for 18 mil. On my debt, I'd have 6% interest, for example, which is about 540 grand a year of interest. 540 grand of interest. Let's assume that on my 18 mil, I'm generating also 6% as a commercial year asset. Is 600. What's 6 eighths? 6 eighths are 8, 16, 24, 32, 40, 48. That can't be right, is it? 6 eighths is 48. Fuck yeah. I must have fucked that up then. What's 6 nines? Oh, no, that's right. I did get that right. 48. So this asset here is generating me $1,080,000 of income minus my 540. I end up with $540,000 of income. Okay, assuming no other expenses, which guess what? Is more than I had here because I was only generating a 5% return here. Okay, so I've gone into commercial asset, I've got a slightly higher yield, and maybe I don't need to live on this whole 540,000. So I might come here, I might put 270K, which is half to live on, and I might put 270K for debt reduction because I might, have another 10 years worth of work left, for example. So that 270K over 10 years reduces the debt on here, which then obviously makes the asset generate more money, or you can just go invest the equity with no debt. But it's all about now changing your portfolio from being super growth focused, now to being more cash flow focused. But if we go all the way back to the start, like I said, on the accumulation, it's gotten stickier. Now it's stuck to it. 200 grand, you can only generate 10 grand a year. You want to generate more income, you need to grow your capital base. So that's why we spend a big chunk of our life growing our capital base before we go and generate income. And I can't explain it any simpler than this. You can't do both at the same time because if you try and do that, you're getting suboptimal results in both growth and both in cash flow. You need to be really strategic about your portfolio. You need to be patient. You need to grow before you can generate cash flow. So that is the Flamingo investment strategy. That is how we build out every single one of our portfolios. Now, if someone comes to us with a big chunk of cash, of course, we may not have to then go and generate more capital because they've got more capital, so we can skip parts. But if you are starting from zero, you need to go through every single step. All right. So let's go through some Q&A. I'm a Friggy, Newcastle based. I'll come fix your aircon so your lads aren't stuck sweating bullets. We're in Sydney. So if you want to come to Sydney, more than happy to. Where do you find commercial properties? Is it better to look by yourself or through a buyer's agent? Well, if you're asking a question of where do you find commercial properties, probably wouldn't go buy one yourself because it sounds like you have zilch idea of what you're doing. So don't do that. And commercial is a lot more technical and there's a lot more things that can go wrong than in residential land. Commercial property, I look at just like a business transaction. You think the residential world is sharky, the commercial world is very sharky. How much are your service fees? They start at $35,000 plus GST. I really enjoyed your videos and I've already used some of your strategies. I'm 50 and aiming to retire sooner than planned. You're making a really positive impact. Good on you. Fuck yeah, Ravi. You're a good man. All right. Semyak Jane. He's on the live. Any questions on Instagram, team? For anyone who watched the whole thing? No? All right. It's hot as balls. It's hot as balls. So I might just do one more, let's do...
Wait, you were going to run through the SMSF thing?
Oh yeah, the SMSF thing. Someone asked a question before around self-managed super fund and the strategy in there. If I use the same 30-year horizon, 15 years in the middle, self-managed. This is Jack's SMSF. Okay, let's say property one at age, whatever the fuck you are, you got 30 years. I'm assuming, right? So I'm saying you're 30-ish. You bought this property for $1 million, and like I said, you've got 800 grand worth of debt on it. Bang, we get to year 15. Let's say that property's grown from being worth $1 million to being worth 2.5 million, and let's assume that the debt is no longer 600. You've paid it down. 800, and let's say over 15 years you've paid it down to 400k. So you've now got $2 million or $2.1 million in net equity inside of super. If you own a property for long or any asset for longer than 12 months, you only pay 10% CGT. So what I would do at this point, instead of holding that asset forever, is I would sell it down. I'd end up with around about $2 million after I pay CGT selling costs and that. And then I would go leverage that $2 million into, let's say, $6 million worth of assets now. So I've got $2 million. I'm going to leverage that into $6 million worth of assets. So now I've got $6 million and $4 million worth of debt. And then over the next 15 years, my idea is that 6 would grow to, say, 12 million. That 4 million would drop to 2 mil or thereabouts. And now I've got $10 million worth of capital. So the play inside of super is a little bit different. You can't access equity to go buy more property, obviously. Fuck me dead, it's hot. I'm just going to unbutton my shirt. I'm sorry. You can't use equity. You'd have to sell the properties to access the capital. But that would be the strategy. Same thing, right? Accumulation, you can't really accelerate in super because you can't renovate or add value to a property that's got debt attached to it. But it's like acceleration and accumulation here. This is incubation. You get to here, you consolidate. But then if you've got time, you can do another cycle again and then consolidate and then go to cash flow. Cool. I'm very focused during accumulation phase of super with property to just focus on growth because any income you get gets taxed at 15% versus CGT only getting taxed at 10% if you've owned it for longer than 12 months. You don't want to have income going in that's getting taxed, which you can't use anyway. All right. Next. Any other questions on that before I bounce? 400k loan, 1 sooner. When can I get property 3? Can you build a granny flat in soft managed super fund? Not if you've got debt on the property. If the property is debt free, yes you can, but you have to pay for it with cash. Cool. What's the next topic we're going to cover off? Locations. Fuck, everyone loves locations, don't they? Okay. Here, I'm going to run you through a few things. I'm not going to run you through my top 3 locations first. I'm going to run you through my top 3 framework of how I look at locations. So, this is what this is how 95% of property investors think, right? They go, what locations are you buying in this year? I'm like, what? Sorry? What locations are you buying in this year? Oh, the same locations I bought in for the last fucking 20 years. What are you talking about? Good locations don't get worse. They only get better and turn into great locations. So the way to think about locations is you should not change where you buy. If you buy in a location today, why would you not buy in that same location 20 years ago? I know what some people will say, oh, well, the value may not be there. Why would the value not be there? If you think it's a good location and you're going to hold it forever, the growth should continue relatively stable, right? So I would always invest in the same locations. I would have much rather buy a property in Bondi 30 years ago than today. But do I think Bondi is going to be way more expensive and way more scarce in 30 years' time? Absolutely. So good only goes to great. We don't buy new locations every year. The only thing that changes every year is how much we have to pay to buy the same property in that location. Okay? So good goes to great. If you wouldn't hold it forever, don't buy it today. Really simple. There's so many people at the moment buying in places like Darwin. And their methodology is, let's get in and let's get out. Let's make some easy money. That is a terrible, terrible thing to do in real estate. Okay? You're not Warren Buffett. You're not an active investor. Just, if you would not hold that property for the next 50 years, thinking that it's going to be a better investment in 50 years than it is today, don't buy that property today. Okay? This is a fundamental belief that I have. I've never sold a property other than one that I had to sell when I bought my business partner out, because we owned it together, but I wish I never sold that property. Okay, don't sell good quality assets because they're only going to become great quality assets tomorrow. Okay, so if you wouldn't hold it forever, don't buy it today. Locations don't change. Good locations become great locations. The only thing that will change is if you don't buy it this year, you will pay more next year. Okay. Joel, what's my 3rd location tip? Come on. The data. It's all right, here we go. Track record. Joel knows. Data. Data is track record. Do not invest in a location if the track record looks like this. That is like one of those things where you go to the hospital and someone died and it's like, beep. That is not good. Okay? If a location hasn't performed for the last 20 or 30 years, sure, you may get lucky and you may get a little bit of growth here. But there is so much risk involved in investing like that. Only invest in locations that have a really strong track record that looks like this. That's what we're looking for. Why would you go against that? Why would you do this? It's silly. I did a video the other day. There was the AFR put a video out and spoke about the best investor cash flow locations or some shit. And I looked at all the long-term data and it was like this. It looked like Bondi Beach. You don't want to invest like that because if you look at this here and then you look at this here, they're almost the same. Sure, they went up, but they also went down. And like I said, you're not Warren Buffett, so you're not going to know when to sell, okay? So always invest in locations that have a proven track record of performance. It's very simple. Like this is too simple for smart people. So if you're smart, you probably shouldn't listen to me. Good locations turn to great locations. So just buying a good location from the start. If you won't hold it forever, don't buy it today. And only invest in locations that have a strong track record of performance. Okay? Very simple. 3. Yeah. No data. How do you find out about a track record? Great question. If you don't have data, if you don't understand how to find out about a track record, really, really key thing. If you are someone who is data driven and you don't want to go and pay for an expert to do it, sometimes you have to spend a little bit of money, right? So the free data that's out there online right now, domain, real estate, SQM research, all that shit, they only give you really recent data, which again is not all that accurate because, you know, what happens in the last 12 months doesn't really matter all that much. To get long-term data, you likely will have to pay for data, okay? So you can get a subscription to somewhere like CoreLogic or Cotality, it's called now. That's where we get a lot of our data from. It'll show you 20 years worth of data. You can go further than that, and there's lots of data suppliers out there that will give you much greater data than 20 years, and they give it to you individual suburbs. But again, when you're buying real estate and you're spending hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars on assets, spending money to make sure you're not fucking it up is probably a good idea. Okay? So, locations, yeah. Macquarie Bank. Oh, we want to talk about about to launch with you. Fuck yeah, JP. Are all your strategy based questions discussions after joining, or can they be asked and decided before? No, well, the strategy is built out after you sign up. So obviously when you sign up with us, you're signing up for 1, a strategy, 2, finance analysis, obviously structuring with the different stakeholders we need to be able to give you the right advice. And then on top of that, it's obviously the purchase. Now, whether we did the first purchase within your SMSF, whether we do the first purchase in your personal name, whether we do the first purchase in a trust, you know, it doesn't actually matter. You're committing to the first purchase. So we'll build the strategy out and then tell you what we recommend doing for the first purchase. So that happens in the strategy component. We get the finance back and all that jazz, and then we go, okay, well, based on the outcome, that's what we're doing. I'll run you through a real life example. I had a strategy call just before I jumped on here with a client. So they had actually committed to a commercial asset with a really prominent commercial buyer's agency. They wanted us to review the asset that they'd committed to. They were in the due diligence period still. I said, sweet, I'll review it for you. They bought this in the super. I reviewed it. It was in Melbourne. It was like a retail hospitality setup. It sold for 13 years prior for less than what they were paying today, which is obviously a good thing, but about $20,000 less. So they'd made no money. And the rental income today was $70,000 per annum based on the current tenant. But many years ago, it was 90. So they had no rental growth either. Needless to say, the advice I give them was don't buy. So then we said, okay, don't buy that property. They went out of that. Then I said, okay, let's do resi in the SMSF. Go and sell one of your other investment properties. With the sale of that, they'll get about 600 grand out of the sale. Use that to clear the vast majority of your owner-occupier debt. They'll go from having 830 of debt to 230 of debt. Over the next 3 years, hammer that debt down from 230 to 0 because of one reason, because that then frees up, I think it was about $6,000 to $7,000 a month of no more owner-occupier repayments. And over the next 3 years that you're paying that debt down, we can use some equity to go and buy 1 or 2 more investment properties. So that was a strategy I built up for those guys. So the first purchase is SMSF. I told them what to do for the next 3 or 4 years, and we'll go and buy a few more properties in individual name over or individual capacity over the next few years. So I hope that helps. Nice.
It might not, but it's not really me
Okay.
postponing.
Here we go. Someone asked the question around with Macquarie and now CBA no longer lending to companies and trusts. Do you think? No, I don't think all lenders will do the same. And to be clear, Macquarie and CBA are not no longer lending to trusts altogether. Macquarie has put a pause on it until they rewrite their policy. And CBA still lends to trust and companies. You just have to be an existing CBA customer. So they haven't gotten rid of it altogether. Let me get something very, very clear. And again, this is Jack's perspective. The wealthiest customers that any of these banks have, the wealthiest, and when they're the wealthiest, they have the most amount of debt. All of them would have debt inside of entities. They would not be borrowing in their personal name. So they're not going to cut it off completely. But what they are going to stop is they're going to stop everyday punters from over leveraging themselves. The reason Macquarie was first to move, and not a lot of people realize this, is because with Macquarie's trust policy, you didn't need an accountant's letter to say this trust pays for itself. You could self-declare that, which means people were lying and saying this trust pays for itself when it doesn't. So that's why they were first to move. CBA, again, are a major lender, so they've just said you have to be an existing customer, so they have more visibility on your overall situation. So no, I think major lenders will change policies like they always do, but I don't think they're going to remove it altogether. No. Yeah, I also have a video, Joel is telling me now, on the YouTube channel where I break it down in more detail if you want to go look at it. I think the title of it is something like Macquarie Banks, fuck trust lending or some shit. So anyway, Joel's the marketing guy. I just talk. Purchasing my first place now using the 5% scheme. My plan is to move out and rent the PPR after 12 months. Should I pay GST? You don't pay GST. You mean CGT. And transfer into a trust to protect borrowing capacity. Look, no. I think if you have no borrowing capacity after your first purchase, you should not do that. And the reason I say that is because you will likely have no cash flow anyway. If you only earn 80 or 100 grand a year, like it's still a good income, don't get me wrong. But it's not an income where you're going to go huge portfolio. So I don't think you should do that because it's not going to be all that beneficial to you. Is there any risk in buying commercial property without having residential practice if you're running a business that can operate out of commercial property? Look, there's risk in everything, right? But what I think with commercial and what people get wrong, let me give you a real life example again, is that we had, we've just gone unconditional on a big childcare center, okay? Brand new childcare center, national operator as the tenant, okay? So this is the childcare center, national operator. So there's two things that happen. They go down here. This is the lease. This is the lease. The lease says, we're paying 430 grand a year. We're paying all of the outgoings, blah, 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 blah. Okay? That's what the actual lease says. Now, if you were uneducated, you would go, the lease says 430 a year, paying all the outgoings, done my pest and building inspection, sweet, we'll go unconditional. But what developers do when they're trying to get tenants in, or landlords do when they're trying to get tenants in, is they keep the lease like this, because when they're trying to get lending from the bank, this is all the bank sees, the proper lease. And then also when you sell the asset, this is all most people see, is the lease. Which means, we're sorry, what happened here? What? Checking connection. Oh, we're back. So all they only see the lease, right? But what they have off to the side is they have this other little agreement, which says for the first 12 months, it's going to be rent-free. So don't pay us any rent for the first 12 months as long as you commit to a 15-year. It's called an incentive deed. Incentive deed. So we're going to give you 1 year rent-free. We're going to give you this. We're going to give you that, blah, 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 blah. So if you went and bought this asset, and incentive deeds can be 5 years rent-free, right? It can be 5 years discounted rent if you're buying, a really risky asset. On face value, it looks good, but when you look at the incentive deed, it may not be as good as it looks. For example, I heard of a story the other day where they had no bond, which really means the tenant has no risk if they leave because the owner's holding nothing. So there's just a lot more risk in commercial property. It's like a business. Like business transactions are sketchy. All right, fuck, I'm sweaty. Can you get me a bottle of water, please, bro? Nah, it's all right. We'll just keep rolling.
Okay, I'll just have to turn it back on.
All right, so it's definitely going to shut down. All right. So it's actually going to shut down in 4.5 minutes, so we're sorry about that. Looking at an IP as first property, broker has offered me a 96% loan to value ratio product. Is this a red flag? Well, no, there would be a reason that the broker. Thank you. That's fine. There would be a reason that the broker has given you a 96%. What has happened here? On my Instagram, I've gone full mongoloid. Yeah, there would be a reason that the broker is giving you a 96% LVR. It's either you don't have enough cash to fund a larger deposit by the time you build in stamp duty and all the other costs. You know, that you may have a limited amount of cash and he wants to get you to a max purchase price. So instead of having a 20% deposit on a lower purchase price, he's gone in with a lower deposit percentage, but on a higher purchase price. So you need to look into the reasons why. I wouldn't say it's a red flag. I would just go, hey, why have we gone with this kind of product? Can you explain it to me? Would you ever put a not so great long-term but high rental return property inside the same trust as a negatively geared house to make the trust self-sufficient quicker? Yeah, potentially. Like, you could do that. I mean, I wouldn't just go buy a shit property to make the trust self-sufficient, in short. Townsville, 2 duplexes on 1 title, $600,000 of value, $300,000 loan, $700,000. Sell as is or split the title. You'd have to run the numbers on what it's going to cost you to split the title, what they'll be worth once it's split, and whether there's actually a return. If there's a return there, sure, why not? What do I think of defense, housing, home rents? I think they're terrible. You should not invest in a property that is leased by someone like that, whether it's defense housing, whether it's NDIS, because they only appeal to those kinds of people or groups, and you want to appeal to the owner-occupied demographic. That's the people you want to appeal to. What else we got? Only just joined. Love your content. I appreciate the Hormozy influence. Thank you. Making it your own. I've got 3 years into business, not ready for property yet, but my ear out for your content is, mate, you're a good man. 400k loan on property 1. Soonish move into property 2. 1.1 to 1.2 in value. Loan 730k. When can I get property 3? Well, when you can get property 3 is when you have the serviceability to be able to get property 3, right? So you've probably got the equity in properties 1 and 2, but you may not have the serviceability in in property 3. You may not have the serviceability, sorry, to go and get property 3. So it comes down to when you have the borrowing capacity, and obviously when you have the equity to be able to do it. When are we going? Do you want to shut it down now? And 1 minute. All right. Any more questions before the computer's going to shit the bed? Do you think APRA is likely to step in with the recent Macquarie CBA shift to trust appetite? If so, do regulators? Look, I don't know. No, I don't think APRA is going to step in because the banks are obviously changing policy to stop any things that shouldn't happen. But who knows if APRA will step in? They've stepped in before when like investment lending got too high. I think it was like 2019. Investment lending went to 40%. They stepped in then, and they obviously put a cap on investment lending. But that's when the non-bank lenders come into the space and just dominate because the non-banks aren't necessarily governed by the same as banks. So that's I think is going to happen in the trust space. If all the banks stop doing it, the non-banks will step in and they'll like capture that whole space. So things change. What is your plan and strategy if a recession happens? Work harder, live on less money, and I don't know, the fuck should the plan be? Like just bury my head? Who knows? What happens if a recession doesn't happen? But like if a recession happens, you're in full control. So I will continue to grow. And we are